I've been waiting.
No, you haven't.
Yeah, I have.
Okay. Welcome, folks. It's hunting season, and we are taking a short break from the tree because it's pouring down raining outside, which you might be able to hear on the podcast, which concerns Easton. Sometimes he'll go check the door. So just letting you know that's, because we don't want to ruin the audio for you guys. We want you to know that we are crystal clear. We want you to hear everything. But I'm
Too
jacked.
late for that.
What?
That already ruined the audio.
How's
Still
that?
talking.
Oh, boy. All right, but today we're going to talk a little bit about calling and calling whitetail deer primarily and some of the techniques that we use. Now, I think we should include decoying in there. I know that you guys haven't done a whole lot of it, but I have done some, and there's a few things that I think that we can help people with. So with that, let's just start this hunting season. Have you guys broke out the call, used it at all?
100%.
Not once.
I think we need to clarify a little bit. The question would be when to start using them.
Well, I think we're going to cover all that. So let's talk about, let's just say October through November or December.
When do you start carrying your antlers?
I carry mine day one.
When do you start carrying your antlers?
Around the 15th
of October.
of October, yeah.
I carry mine probably within the first week.
Yeah, and the reason being is that we've seen deer fighting and deer respond, and that nothing's more evident than watching one of the videos that I have from right by the house the other day where 2 bucks are fighting and 4 bucks end up being in the video. That's where a trail camera actually showed me what was going on there. But they fought for over an hour. Now, they ain't going crazy. They ain't killing each other. But I've already seen a couple people that have posted pictures of bucks that are locked up, which still doesn't mean that they were going
I just tracked a
ham.
deer that he rattled it in.
What's that?
The deer I just tracked for the guy. He rattled that buck in.
And that was, what, a week ago?
Yeah, something like that.
So we're talking 20, not even the 20th, 17th?
Somewhere in there.
When was the video of that super serious fight that I filmed?
That was like the single digits of October. I don't remember whether it was the 4th or the 9th.
I know it was before the 15th.
Yeah, it was like,
And that was not a tickle
full-on
fest.
fight.
Like they were full bore trying to kill each other.
Yep.
But
I think it depends on what you're trying to kill, the time of year, and yeah, mainly those two. Because like if I'm going to take antlers to the stand, I'm going to rattle some right now. It's not because I'm banking on 1 buck to show up. Like I take them right now, especially because Joey's willing to shoot pretty much anything. So if we're sitting there or whatever and we rattle, we got nothing to lose because if they don't come in, it ain't educating them. If they do come in, they're probably going to get shot, considering the fact that it could be a little deer and he's still going to hammer it. So
and that's the only thing that I would tell people that are, well, first of all, let's talk about what calls do we carry. I mean, what are you guys carrying? And I don't care whether it's a brand name. I'm saying
real antlers for one.
Okay.
For antler wise, and then I carry a grunt call and a snort wheeze. The snort wheeze, I mean, I can do it with my mouth. But
you need a pill or something to wake you up?
I'll go take my Adderall later.
We don't need to know what drugs you're on. Okay.
Those are
so
I'm carrying.
Grunt call, snort wheeze, real antlers. You carrying anything different? Same
Nope.
thing.
Same thing.
Me too. Only my grunt call and snort wheeze, I took a Primos trophy. I love I think it's called the trophy grunter. I'm not positive.
Talking about that yellow one?
Yes, sir.
No, it's a power buck and doe.
Power buck and doe. That's
And
what
I
it
do
is.
like that. I really like that grunt call.
Yep. And then I I taped a snort wheeze to that. So because it comes as just a single, so that I have it in one compact and I keep it in one pocket.
I don't even know if I'm gonna have a snort wheeze in my pack.
I'm
comfortable enough just doing it with my mouth.
Yeah, the only time I've done it this year was with my mouth because I didn't have it out. But so when are you gonna start using like a grunt and a snort wheeze and stuff?
So I've already done a little bit, but I have to say I don't do as much as I used to, and that is I'm at a different place in my hunting that used to I used to tell people I called more whitetails in grunt calls using a grunt call than I did turkeys with a turkey call. I don't do that as much anymore. But that back then I was trying to shoot about every buck that I had an opportunity to. And so if I saw a buck, I'd hit a grunt call if they weren't coming toward me and see what kind of response I got. Now I'm much more picky, and a lot of times they do respond, and then you can educate them or they get downwind of you. And so I try not to. And I'm not real big I'll do, I think, what, Nick, would you say maybe 3 times we've hit the antlers together this year out of 7 or 8, 10 sits. I'm not big on blind rattling because I have to have the wind has to be perfect, meaning I have to feel like it's blowing exactly where I want it to, that I know that I feel confident that there's not going to be a deer come from, and it's got to be consistent. I don't want it to swirl at all. If there's any doubt, I'm not hitting the antlers.
Yeah.
Because they are going to come in and look for what they heard, and they're going to try to circle and get downwind eventually.
I'd maybe do it the least. I don't really rattle at all. But I think that's only because I'm trying to kill one specific deer. Now, if I was in somewhere where I was trying to kill, just a good buck, I would definitely consider rattling. But right now, I'm chasing one deer, and maybe he would come, but I would rather see him first and then decide if I want to rattle. And if I could see him, I'd probably grunt at it before I'd rattle. Just because, one, it seems like anytime you can see him like that, that's a lot more movement to try to get away with, and then getting those hung up. And the other thing I hate about rattling is I think it's super effective, but a lot of times you bring in younger deer and then they're sticking around until they wind you or whatever else. And I just don't like doing that. Now, I think if I was trying to kill a deer, I would rattle a lot more. I just don't know how much I would use it. I don't know. I'm just nervous about it, I guess, on one specific deer.
I think
I definitely do.
Which I don't think there's a need. It's just a mental thing for me.
My thing is vision.
I like to be able to see them before I hit the call.
And depending on which one I'm going to throw out first, completely depends on what I'm reading with them. So
or distance.
Yep. So the other day, for example, I'm in the same boat now for the first time ever, picking a deer out, and I saw him. He's like, I don't know, 100 yards away, making a scrape, like going nuts. It wasn't even just like hitting a little bit. Like he was on his hind legs for probably 5 or 10 minutes, just absolutely railing this scrape. And so obviously he was fired up about something. I don't know what, because there wasn't really any other deer in the area unless he was.
Now, you said that was a week ago?
It was on not last Sunday, but the Sunday before, October 16th, I think.
Wow. You're talking yesterday, Sunday, a week ago then.
Yeah, it was
yesterday would have been the 23rd, so that would be the
16th.
16th.
Yep.
So,
and so he's going nuts. I'd rattled a little bit at other bucks for Joey, just to see if they'd. And now here's the thing too. Like when I'm rattling early season compared to like during the rut, I'm rattling like just putting them together a little bit. I'm not like going nuts on them, like they're actually going crazy. But I rattled at him because he was far enough away and it was windy. I didn't think you'd be able to hear a grunt call from that far, and just rattled till I got a little bit of okay, I hear that kind of thing from him.
Reaction of some sort.
And he turned and was looking for a little bit. Then I stopped also because of the movement. Now, granted, in that situation, I rattled behind me, so I was like watching him so he couldn't see me rattling. And then right when if he didn't commit to that, I was like, okay, if he's this fired up, I'm throwing some stuff at him, some calls at him, just to see, because it ain't gonna hurt anything. And he turned to walk across the creek where he wasn't gonna come in, and I grunted at him, and he stops. And I grunt at him again right when he starts to walk in. He stops and looks and like starts to turn like he's going to, and then after that he meandered on, and I was like, okay, he's not gonna do anything. And actually, he ended up going around and then like circled back to like 50 yards. And like he kind of was entertained, and when he got to that, I was like, okay, well if he's gonna give me this much entertainment, I'll entertain it and see what he'll do. And so the moment he tried to walk away, I snort wheezed at him, and he whipped his head, turned around, but still didn't do it. Didn't come in. So in that situation, I didn't hurt anything. He had no idea we were ever there. The wind was never blowing towards him, and it was just the only reason I had no intention of using all 3 calls in one sit, but the only reason I did is because I could see what he was doing, and I'm reading his body language to see if I can coax him a little bit to say, hey, come over here.
Well, I think one of the most important things that you just touched on there is when you're grunting, and I think all of us do it. You guys probably got it from me, and that is we grunt at a deer that's walking or something. When they're stopped and alert and looking at me, I'm not hitting a grunt call. I don't care if they're 100 yards away or 40 yards away. There's just no need. I'm trying to wait till that deer is. I love when they're like slowly walking or they're in the they're nosing around, not looking toward me. They have no clue what's going on, and you get that reaction you're talking about where you hit the grunt call and they whip their head.
Yep.
Or they come up and look, and now you're going, okay, I think he knew that. And then, I'm sitting there waiting, anticipating the moment that he turns his head and not looking at me again, I'm going to hit him again with that grunt call. And then as soon as they do that, it seems like they're trying to identify, I thought I heard a buck grunt, but I'm not sure. And the reason I'm not doing it again, one, they're looking at me, they're going to pinpoint where that sound is coming from. But two, it's because the second time, okay, now he's convinced himself, I think I did hear what I thought I was hearing, and hopefully that will bring him in, but also not right to that location. And so I think using any type of call on a whitetail, the number one key that you got to be thinking about is where's the wind going, because you're trying to figure out. There's been a lot of deer, even deer that I wanted to shoot, that I didn't rattle at because they were going to go get downwind of me before I could get a shot, and I had to let them go.
What time of night was that?
5:30.
Okay, so you also had plenty of time before dark.
Yep.
That's the other thing I think that I get nervous about after Eli and I grunted in base drop is going back now. I probably wouldn't have grunted at him the second time because there was really only 10 minutes or something like that. But that was also, I think that was on October 17th.
That was early.
Yeah, it was early. I know, huh?
It was the first southwest wind that we had that year. And I'm trying to remember what it was that Mom made me go to, because it would have been me in that tree.
You were hunting with her.
Oh, that's what it was. She wanted to hunt.
So base drop was another mature deer. Dad ended up killing him. He was 5 years old, I think.
5 years old when I shot him.
And I was on a different deer, but for whatever reason, I can't remember. We had a wind that I couldn't hunt him or something, and so we went and sat that stand to see if we'd see base drop. I wasn't really actually thinking that we would see him because it was so early and it was warm. It was like 65, 70 degrees.
Yeah, but they cut the corn. I was there the day before in that stand. And they were cutting the corn while I was there. And I was like, tomorrow I'm going to be in the stand. And then Mom said she wanted to go hunting, and she had a deer she wanted to shoot. And so I had to go with her.
Well, so anyways, he comes out really early, like 5:30, 5 o'clock, something like that, in the cornfield, then works his way to us. He was at like 42 or 43 before this stupid doe to the left winded us, and then they like ran off. And then, but then he came back out, I don't know, 30 minutes later or something like that, and just was kind of milling around. He was probably 180 yards away, but we only had maybe 15 minutes left or 20 minutes left. And I was like, well, I'll just try to grunt at him and see what he does. And I grunted at him, and he, sat there forever, just looking over there, looking over. And I think I grunted at him one more time. And then he finally ended up committing, but it was too dark. And so he comes right underneath us. And I think looking back now, I probably wouldn't risk giving him that information and that knowledge, because if he had winded us, I think he probably would have had an idea that he may not be very responsive of a grunt call in the future. Maybe he would, I don't know. But I think, too, a lot of it just comes down to kind of reading their body language, because like if he was interested for sure. That's why I grunted at him again. If he didn't care at all, I don't think I would have. I wouldn't have grunted at him again.
And some deer are more vocal than others too. I think they respond to he was a super vocal deer, because the other two encounters that Eli had with him, and Eli and I, we heard him chasing does and grunting, and I knew it was him. I'm like, I know it's him. And sure enough, he walked up right underneath us, but he was 40 feet below us in that stand that was out of that. He was way below us.
So what do you think that the grunt actually means? Because the more I think about it right now, I don't think bucks really grunt at each other. It's almost always I hear them when they're chasing does, they're grunting.
I have heard them once or twice when they are fighting. You'll hear it, but it's not as loud. Or maybe it doesn't sound as loud because they're too busy there's leaves and everything going on when they're fighting. But you will hear a grunt once in a while when they're fighting. But I've not ever.
Is that like a grunt because they're fighting?
Or is that like could be, yes. I don't know that.
Well, I'm just like, because I'm thinking now, have you ever seen a buck walk out or next to another buck and at him? I don't think I've ever seen one do that.
No, I've seen them snort wheeze at each other, and they're usually bristled up when they're doing it.
So they're probably coming to a grunt then, thinking that there's a
buck chasing a doe.
Yeah, buck.
If I'm just, you guys can put me in my place on this one, but if I'm relating it to like elk are typically, when they're bugling, not all the time we've talked about it. When they get to like kind of that second magnitude of bugling, it's like, hey, better be careful. But other than that, typically when they're bugling, I think it's typically to impress the cows or try to get the attention of cows or things like that. And then when they're bugling at each other is when they're competing with each other.
It's an aggression.
And I would imagine that with a grunt, most of the time when you're seeing a deer grunt is when they're with a doe. So when another deer is hearing a grunt or another buck is hearing a grunt, it's okay. I'm going to go over there because he's with a doe. He's doing something.
I think
with
that
a
definitely
doe.
that's what you're telling them, is that there's a buck with a doe, and that he thinks that he's going to either get the breed or she's going to be close to getting into heat.
And I think the snort.
And that's what
the snort wheeze is 100% aggression.
Oh yeah, that's at another buck.
Yep.
Or I've also seen them though when they're just flat irritated and they'll snort wheeze. Like, and the one I'm thinking of is that 9. What I can't remember. You know where I'm talking about, that I shot the buck I shot in the shoulder.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so when that buck came in that day, he ended up coming in, and the doe was stomping and blowing. And Kyle thought that the doe had winded us. And I'm like, the wind's not blowing toward them. She is irritated with him because he was right on her. I mean, like 2 feet away. And then he snort wheezed at her when she was stomping and she's blowing. And then finally he was, and there was no other bucks around. He was irritated at her as well, and they were just having this battle.
I definitely think the snort wheeze is the most serious.
Yes.
Like, okay, we're
done playing now.
Yep, it's on. Because every time I've ever seen one do that, they're postured up and they're going towards that other buck, and either the other buck, one of them says, "Okay, I'm out," or they fight. Every single time I've seen it.
And that's the risk you take when you use the snort wheeze.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of deer when I've snort wheezed at them. Okay, that was too much. I don't like that.
Yep.
That's the one call I was trying to think if I've ever snort wheezed a shooter in. I don't think I have. I've now grunt called in a shooter. I've rattled in shooters, but I don't think I've ever snort wheezed, but I've had good deer respond to it.
So one thing
I
we
think
should
that's
probably cover
also
real quick.
that's the least amount used call.
Yeah,
in my opinion,
I
that
for
I
sure.
use.
I don't use it near as much
Very
because
rare.
because you got to have that. I think you almost to snort wheeze, you have to have a deer visible.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to blind snort wheeze.
Well, and I think too, if
Yeah,
you're
I
gonna
don't.
snort wheeze at a deer, he better be the dominant one.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and even
Which
if
I
he's,
think there's a few deer though, like I would have no problem snort wheezing, like a Juice.
oh,
Like
yeah.
I know Juice right there, and I snort wheeze a Juice is. Let's go, brother. Come on,
Yeah.
let's fight. And he's probably gonna come.
But do you know how many times I called in Juice? I mean, he
Yeah,
he
but
hated
that's
all
'cause
other deer.
That was his attitude, though.
Yeah.
You knew him well enough. Where there's some other deer that I know that are big bucks that I would be really, really nervous
Yep.
about snort wheezing at them for that reason. Just because I do think they may say, "Hey, I'm a lover, not a fighter,"
Yep.
But so I think we always grunt at them first. But so let's just say that. Well, I think the first thing we should probably cover here is when do you think the best time period is to be calling a deer, and then I think we should go into more of like specific scenario tactics.
Well,
So,
You
your
wanna go
most
first?
effective times, I would think, would be, I mean, like I said, I'll do pretty much all of them any time of the year, depending on the deer's reaction, because some of them are ready to go and some of them aren't. But I'd say, generally speaking, pre-rut to rut.
So
Like
like,
when
let's
the-
get some dates for Midwest.
Like October probably 20th through November 15th to November 20th, somewhere in there.
and I would agree, only if I got the right scenario, meaning I got a deer that is not downwind and I can see him, I want to have all 3 things in my pocket.
Well, I'm saying like the most effective. What
Yeah,
what dates do you
I'm
think?
the
Well,
is
same.
I mean,
most
if I
effective?
go off of when I've killed them, I've killed 21st, and 22nd. I've killed 3 deer that I've rattled
October?
of October. I've rattled in. I could see one of them. 2 others I could not see. I mean, I had an idea that they were there, but I didn't see them.
I think there's 2 time periods that I think between the 20th and the 31st, maybe even November 1st or 2nd, and then I think like skipping November 3rd through the 14th.
15.
Then
I
I
was gonna
think
say
like the
15.
15th to the 20th is pretty good because I think that what happens is I think when they hear a buck grunt or they hear fighting on October 25th or 26th or 27th, they're not finding any does in heat yet. I mean, there's one somewhere that those bucks that are getting excited, they're going to come check it out because they're like, holy crap. Like I think the 31st or the 1st when all of them know, okay, there should be a doe in heat soon.
Any second.
And then he hears bucks fighting or something. I think in his head is there's probably a doe over there. He hears grunting, and I think, here he comes. Where I think you get to November 4th, 5th, 6th, at least from what the deer I've grunted at during that time period, they don't care at all. They are just smelling some hot chick, and they are just wherever she is.
However, you get that buck going from that first doe to the second doe or second doe to the third doe, and holy, same thing. I mean, especially if he's a dominant buck and he's just cruising trying to get to the next doe, he hears a fight, breaks. I'm going over there. I'll just go over and cut it all off and take her right now.
Or I think, though, sometimes, though, maybe I haven't had any luck really during that time period. And maybe grunting, too, would be different. But I think a lot of times that they just are like, you idiots can do whatever. I'm going to find a girl, you know. I don't know.
The rarest time I've had it work was December 2nd and 3rd, both or 2 years in a row. December 2nd, I rattled one in. He came he kind of meandered over like he was just curious. I saw him the whole way, though. And the other one was like 300 yards away. I saw him on top of a hill, last light. It was to the point where I was sitting there thinking, okay, if you rattled this deer, he needs to either get here now or I'm not going to be able to shoot. Well, that one was December 3rd, and rattled at him, and he came running, and was tearing trees out on the way, or little bushes and stuff. So, and that's, to me, I would have, I did that last-ditch effort kind of thing. I wouldn't have thought that, I would think that, the first one's reaction of, okay, maybe I'll go check this out just for the heck of it. Yeah. But I was not expecting a deer to just freaking go nuts that late in the year.
Well, I think one is sometimes it's just the demeanor of the deer. Two, you catch them at the right time. Because the one that I will go back to, the buck that I have going down in the basement from Illinois, that buck came from 300 yards away, 400 yards away. I saw him. And I'm smacking antlers as loud as I possibly can because he's not going to be able to hear it. And it was 10 minutes later, he doesn't show up. I go to the antlers again, thinking if he came down here, he would be in this bottom with me now, and I would never be able to see him. It's all timber. And so I whacked the antlers together again, and next thing I know, I look over, and he popped out in the field. And I had a decoy sitting there, and he walked into the decoy, and I shot him at 16 yards. Now, but that was first or second week of November. That's when we would always come. Before we lived in the Midwest, I would come here and hunt. And so putting all that together, I think it's just a matter, and I would tell you, what I didn't know at the time when I shot him, that it was the same buck that I'd had a counter with 2 or 3 days earlier, and my release got stuck, and I couldn't clip it to my string, and he got away. And he was chasing a doe all around underneath my stand. I had him standing there dead to rights at 8 yards for 3 minutes, long enough for me to get into my pack, get out another release, put it on my hand, and almost get to draw again before he finally walked off. And then I ended up killing him a few days later. He'd lost that doe, and now I was assuming he was looking for another one.
Well, I think that's a good thing to keep in mind too. Is I now have anybody that hunts with me. I have the 30-minute rule. Anytime that you rattle, grunt, do anything, you are standing up, ready to shoot, and you are staying that way for at least 30 minutes. Do not sit down. Do not put your bow up. Do not do anything for at least 30 minutes, because I had 2 or 3 times with hunting with some other people that we got burnt.
It wasn't you. He's not talking about you, is he? Or me?
No,
I don't think it's me. I know who he's talking about.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying we got burnt because the one was the only time I've ever blind grunted. Just being really honestly, I was just screwing around. I wasn't actually I don't even remember why I did it. Oh, that's what it was. So we had a friend that was telling us about what we call now the dirt bike.
Oh, yeah, we're going to talk about that. Because the dirt bike is something.
Oh, I believe in the dirt bike, And so the dirt bike is basically just like a grunt where you're just really long, just for a long time, 8 to 10 seconds. And it has been
longer,
20
or 30.
As much air as you got. And so far it's been the most effective grunt call that I've ever seen. So I just did that, screwing around, could not see a deer, nothing, and just did the dirt bike, just and then friggin' 4 minutes later, there's a 150-something standing at 25 yards and pegs us because my shooter wasn't standing up and ready to go. And that one got away, and then we had another one that we rattled, and then about 15 minutes later, he came right underneath.
That's a big key.
What's that?
I said that's a big key. He was the camera guy.
Oh, yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
Not everyone. I agree with you, though. You have to be ready, right now.
Because they don't always come running.
No.
I'd say more times than not. They take their time. So I think especially your less dominant bucks, they may take their time and kind of come in and investigate before they see who they're going to have to go and tango with.
Well, there's an elk scenario that I love when I do my calling with elk, that I like to stay where I've been calling from and hunt from that spot. because I feel like elk will come in afterwards and try to figure it out. The satellite bull that has been run off, he doesn't want to get beat up, so he doesn't want, but he wants to know there was a whole lot going on over there. I sniff my way in there and figure out where she went, go from there. I think that's what the whitetails are doing the same. I'll come to that, but I'm not going to the fight. I don't care about the fight. I want to find out the chick that they're fighting over.
See, or smell who's in the fight.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And just take his time and come in. I use splits that deer came in just walking, but he came straight to some rattling antlers on the 22nd of October. It's just such if you don't have those things in your arsenal, you're just you're missing opportunities. I mean, where you would, because what else do you have to lose? Now, there are times when I would tell someone, you don't call at them. Deer wins you, sees you, knows that you're there in any way, shape, or form. The last thing you want to do, and I still watch people on television doing it. They're walking off and please, and all you're doing is begging that deer to come back. Please come back. Please come back.
That they can connect you to your call,
then
don't
do it. Yep. Just wait for another day.
Now, how I'm curious because I absolutely hate them. What do you think the statistics are on? Now it's completely variable on deer or variance on deer, but what do you think the difference is in using like plastic horns compared to real?
Okay. Have you used any? The acrylic ones?
I don't think so. I don't know that. I think I maybe carried a rattle bag once. I don't really remember.
I used to carry the Primos, the acrylic set that they made. I don't know if they still make it or not.
They do.
And I broke so many of those and what would happen is we were hunting in Montana and it'd get really cold and then you whack them together and I got tines flying everywhere. But
real life, man.
I would tell you that I was probably rattling in just as many deer with those as I was with real antlers, but durability wouldn't last.
Really?
Yeah.
See, maybe it's just a me thing. I hate the sound of them.
The sound of them is definitely distinct.
I can't stand hearing. You can definitely tell it's plastic.
Right.
But that's one thing, though, too. I think when you understand that so I don't know if a lot of people know this or not, but deer don't hear much better than humans. Their hearing is actually about the same as ours. Now, they hear high-pitched noises a little bit better than we do, and they can obviously have some directional hearing with their ears. And I think that people perceive that they hear a lot better than us, but I think that's because when they're in nature and they hear you clank something on metal, that's such an unnatural sound.
Right. Yep.
Where as far as you making some ruckus getting up a tree or a limb falling or something, it's not necessarily all that.
They'll come to that.
Yeah, it's not all, especially if you're hunting out somewhere around cows. That's not all that
or
odd.
Squirrels.
Yeah, so I think that they don't necessarily care all that much, where I think that those unnatural sounds you need to be more careful of. But I think that, I don't know, that like a deer that's 200 yards away, if he could decipher the difference in real antlers or not.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I agree with that, but at the same time, I'm sitting here thinking if I can hear it, if you're saying we have about the same hearing capability, they could. I mean, granted,
yeah, but if
they're
I
not hearing it side by side.
Yards away, could you hear it?
Well, but
I think you could pretty easily. I think they're completely different.
The biggest thing that I'm not a fan of is rattling bags, like you mentioned, or like they make some things that are.
See, if I was going to carry anything though, it would be one of those rattle bags, just because I do get really sick and tired of packing my antlers.
Yeah, but I'll pack them because what I'm able to replicate is so much better. I can pick out a bag from a long ways away, and I think some deer can pick that out, that it's just a bunch of stuff rattled. But I know of guys that have taken 2 arrows and whacked the arrows together because they didn't have rattling antlers, and a buck came to it. Oh, yeah.
What?
They took his quiver and then took an arrow and put it between there and was like click, click, clack, click, and here they came. I can tell you of people that have dropped stuff out of a tree. Marty would be one, and a buck comes over to it. I mean, there's another little trick of the trade.
That deer had so much testosterone in him that he couldn't see through his eyeballs.
But if you catch the right deer at the right time, you could have that. One of the little tricks that you'll hear a lot of. I have one that I believe that is super effective. I don't get to do it almost ever, and that is pounding my antlers on the ground. And pounding them on the ground and raking through the leaves, and now you really sound like 2 bucks fighting.
I wonder too how much how effective it would be if you could be grunting and making the noise of a buck chasing a doe in the leaves. I feel like any of those deer on the edge, like that would be the one thing that would send them over. But I don't know how you could replicate that really in a tree.
Well, and where I would talk about, the only place that I'm really able to replicate what I'm talking about is when I'm hunting out of a ground blind. Now, the other one that I've known guys that have done it, and I think there's someone out there preaching that they do it all the time. Maybe they do. That's tying your antlers off on a rope and dropping them to the ground, and then just kind of lifting up on the rope and get the antlers to clink together, but it's mixing in the leaves. The other thing is that sound then is on the ground. It's not up in the tree. So it should have a better result. But one of my favorite things to do is before I rattle is a lot of times if I have another tree close by in limbs, I'll rake the tree. And just the other day, Mom and I knew that Swoops was coming because I heard him raking a tree.
Yeah.
I told her, I said, that's a buck raking a tree. And about that time, Swoop shows up. So I think they can distinguish that, and tell that is someone over there raking or thrashing a tree, and they start to come that way. And then
You can definitely tell, too, when they're pawing the ground. You
For
can
sure.
hear that
Oh,
on
you
them
can
when they're
hear
hitting
that.
scrapes, that.
yeah, it's
See,
a long.
I don't like I like the theory of dangling your antlers off the stand and hitting the leaves and stuff because it does sound great. I can't stand the thought of how much movement it goes into. One, I can't control how it sounds. I can't control how hard it's fighting. You got to bend down, and you're doing whatever the heck you're doing with your arm. There's crap moving all around on the ground, and then you got to stand back up and everything. And we all know that sometimes when you get deer that are coming quick, standing up ain't an option. Yeah, that's why his 30-minute thing of you need to be standing and ready to go.
I don't know
That's
how
why
many,
I always keep, like, even if I am rattling in the stand, I keep it where there's not as much movement, so it's, like, right next to me, and wherever I'm going to put them is extremely accessible. So I can
and
just
that's what I
set
was
them
gonna
there,
say.
bow.
Yeah,
Ready to go.
you got to have, like, the hook has to be where it's going to be, because I don't know how many times I'm in mid antler clash together, buck, and they are running at you or coming straight at you, and all you have time is one hand to be able to. You need to be able to hang them up like right now.
Yeah, you better have somewhere, too, that you can hang them up so you don't
Yes.
drop them or something. And then too, those times when they are running like that, grab your freaking bow. Like,
Yep.
you're okay. I know a lot of people that, they're running at when they're running through the
Grab
trees
it.
like
They
that,
can't
they
see
can't
that
see
well.
that well. Grab your bow and
Be ready.
get ready. Get your feet wherever you need to be positioned to shoot. Okay, so let's just do a scenario based. You got a good deer that you want to shoot October 28th. It's 35 minutes before dark, and he's going the wrong way. What call are you going to throw a call at him? And then, if so, what call are you throwing at him first?
How far is he?
120.
Rattling.
Yeah.
Now the other thing I would tell you, the next thing is wind. Is it windy? Is it raining? Or something like that where I think I need the rattling antlers. If it's one of those dead calm days and I think he can hear that grunt call, I'm probably trying the grunt first because I want to make contact with him with the least amount of, I don't want to overdo it yet. So
Well, I think it makes a big difference here, too, in the next 10 days because here in the Midwest, when our leaves start falling off, that's when I get really nervous about rattling stuff because you can see forever. That's where Eli and I have been hunting. You probably couldn't pay me to rattle there unless I could see him, and I knew he was somewhere where there's no way he could see us because they're above us. Now it's a little ways back, but where they're all coming from, there's no, without me trying to get us 60 feet in the stand, especially the more these leaves fall, they're all going to be able to see us. Right. So I don't want to take the risk of moving that much when I couldn't see him and have another deer bust me or something that could cost me that opportunity.
Yep. But I mean, adding realism, if there's a way to do it, is, and you guys have heard me talk about this. Mine came from Arkansas. I mean, and I know because a lot of people are going to say, well, your deer in the Midwest are way more aggressive. But the whitetail deer on the East Coast and down south can be rattled in as well, other than Texas. And that was in Arkansas where I first started messing with the pounding on the ground. I had a buck that ran underneath me multiple times, and I couldn't get a shot at him because he was chasing a doe. And I mean, that's one of the things about the rut that is tough. Sometimes you may see your target buck or a target buck, and you can't get a shot because they ain't slowing down. And this buck happened to come by me 3 or 4 times, and he's grunting and he's carrying on. Well, I saw him go into like a 1-acre patch of timber that the farmers had left that's where they parked all their rigs and stuff like that. And anyhow, there's no rigs there at this time. The buck goes in there with that doe. I know he's in there. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go over and I'm going to hit a grunt call because they're about 200 yards away, too far away for me to really make any sound. And back then I didn't carry rattling antlers. I was carrying a grunt call. So I get out of the stand. I hike over there where I know that they can't see me. I get within, 30 yards of that timber, and I'm kind of out in this open field, but there's a little bush, and so I get next to the bush, and I grunted a couple times. Nothing happened. I was so disappointed. I was like, I knew that if I just grunted one time, he was going to come out of there. Didn't happen. So I decided, well, I'm going to try something. They had stacked some rocks there. I started pounding those rocks on the ground, and I hit that grunt call one time. Next thing I look up, he's like 12 yards away, standing over top of me, and I don't know how he got there so fast. Never killed him because my bow's laying on the ground because I had rock in each hand.
Yeah.
But that pounding on the ground is what made when he heard that, that was it. And
Well, I think that's probably no different than your elk stuff, where I think calling to deer depends a lot on the level of pressure that they're getting.
absolutely.
So you got a deer that's completely unmessed with. Rattling, you may be able to just rattle, and he's going to come like a bat out of hell. Where other places, if he's hearing rattling every day, that someone has,
right.
and he's winded a person or two. Yeah, no different than elk hunting. There's some places where you can hit one cow call, and here they come, and you shoot them, and it's freaking great. And I love those places. And then you can have others where you got to throw the book at them and do all kinds of creative stuff to get the raghorns to do anything.
Yeah.
For sure. I think a lot of it depends on. So I like the scenario, though. Let's take the scenario that you got a deer that it's morning. It's 8:30 in the morning. An hour after daylight, man. And this deer has come in, but he didn't give you a shot. He came into 40-some yards or whatever, and he's milling around, and he starts to leave. Wind is quartering. So the wind's not blowing to him, but it's not blowing away from him. In the scenario I would give you, let's just say the wind's blowing from you to me, and Easton's the deer. And so the deer's over here at 50 yards, and he's started to like he's going to leave. What are you going to do?
Probably going to let him go. Leave him be.
It's
So you
how
said it's
much?
quartering towards the way
Wind's
he's walking,
blowing like
right?
this, and he's over here, and but he looks like he's going to leave.
And he's at 50.
He's at 50.
You're saying it's blowing that way or blowing
No,
that
blowing
way?
this way. Blowing like this. Blowing to me.
I don't
bit.
care. I'm calling at him. I'm going to rattle at him. Something. Just a little bit. Just enough to give him something. And I wouldn't go very long. I'd rattle at him just a little bit to where he knows something was up, and he'll either come in right there, or I'm giving him an hour, and he might circle back in, or I'm waiting for him to get out of sight, and then I'm going to rattle back at him so he can't see up to me.
We're still thinking.
Well, I think it's 8:30 in the morning.
Mhm.
Date
November 1.
November 1.
He's
That's
by
tough
himself, though. He's not with a doe.
one. And this is a mature deer.
Sure, deer. Deer we would definitely shoot.
Well, there's probably a pretty good chance that he's gonna at 8:30 in the morning on November 1st, and he doesn't have a doe, right? There's probably a pretty good chance he's still gonna cover some ground. So, because otherwise, I would not call at him, and I would try to, like if it was October 28th or something, I would get down and probably just move, try and get a little closer to wherever I thought he was gonna come out that afternoon, or in that exact scenario, I'd be trying to look at the terrain and see if there was some way that would make him have to come 10 yards, even if he was going to get my wind, and then I would call at him. And I would just know that I've got, this amount of time to shoot him before he's going to get my wind. And hopefully he would just come right to me. But
So what are you doing when you're in the stand? Right there, exact scenario he just said. What are you doing?
Watson, it would depend on, I would have to look at it and see if I felt as though that he was for sure just going to go and win me, or if he could try and get my wind and come within another 10 yards
So
closer.
you're just going to leave him. Not going to do anything.
That's what I'm saying. I would need if
is
there was
that-
like a creek bed or something that he would have to go across to go and get my wind, that he's got to come closer to me, I would call to him. I would grunt at him. I just think if he doesn't have to go very far to get my wind, I'm definitely, if I'm going to
I was
call
just
at
asking
him,
in a general
if
perspective.
I'm going to call at him, I'm absolutely going to try and muffle the call as much as I can so that he can't pin
Right.
exactly where it's coming from, and it makes him feel as though maybe it came from this direction or something. And then if he's all fired up, I'm probably going to call to him and think that he's at least going to come towards me as he goes to get the wind, and I'm just going to be ready to shoot. That would be a scenario where I'm not going to try and let him get to 20 if he's getting close to my wind. He's 35, I'm shooting him.
And I would say I'm 50-50. And I use that because I've had that situation happen multiple times, and I think you're kind of hitting
Yeah.
the nail on the head. If they have any inclination that they would keep going and go down, if he had come in from over here and was headed this way to start, then I probably won't grunt at him or do anything. I'm going to let him walk away. But if he was coming this way, like he already came from outside of my, like down, somewhat downwind of me, I don't think he's going to go back. I might try it. I mean,
Well, it sounds how you described it, though. Unless he takes a hard turn, he ain't ever
Yeah.
going to find your wind.
right. Well,
Like, even if you let him go.
when you make that call, I believe they're going to circle. They're very rarely do they come right to the tree, right at you. They kind of come in and try to figure out what's going on. So
Well, so let's take this scenario. What do you think
I don't
happened on my deer last year? So my deer last year was November 2nd. Had a buck come in at like the first time I ever sat this stand, had a buck come in at like 8:30, 8:45, and I could see more legs. And then the deer that we were after was right there at 100 yards. And I couldn't believe it. They were, honestly, they were just barely outside of our wind. Our wind was like straight west, and they were just barely to the southeast of us. So they were really close to our wind. But then there was 2 bucks, a doe, and him. And so the doe comes right by us, but then cuts into the timber at like 50, 60 yards. He starts walking right towards us, and I thought he was going to come right down this little lane. I was going to shoot him at like 30. And then he cut like right to follow that doe and stayed at like 50. And I grunted at him, didn't care. I don't think I snort wheezed at him, but I'd have to go back and look at the video. But then I let him get to like 100 and some, and I rattled at him, didn't care, just kept following that doe. Then it wasn't probably 4 or 5 minutes later, the bucks to my left started fighting, and he came sprinting back and then walked right underneath me. I shot him at 6 yards. So what do you think that – do I just suck that much at rattling? Or do
no,
you?
I think that he hit the nail on the head a minute ago on what he was talking about.
I can't see where you're at.
Well, and he was like, and then they might show.
Well, he couldn't see me, though, when I rattled.
Right.
Like, I waited
No.
till he was far enough away that he couldn't.
I can't tell you how many times, though, that I have rattled at a deer, especially chasing a doe. I've rattled and grunted at a deer that I was like, I don't know if they heard me or not, and they just kept on going. Didn't even check up. Hour later, here he is back.
But this was minutes.
I know, and what I'm getting at, though, is I think he heard you, but he was still interested in the doe, trying to see if she was in heat or whatever, and he's following along. And now they picked up from where you left off, and then at the same time, the part that you left out is that you are sitting on one of our rub trees, and we had many videos of that deer at that rub tree. I think he was coming there to say, okay, I'm just going to go wear this thing out, let them know one more time, don't be messing with this area. And he heard you, but he was just.
So you think he checked that doe and said, "Okay, you're not in heat," and then he went back. That's what I think happened too.
I
Is
think
that
he just gave
it felt
up
as though
on
he
her.
needed to check first to make sure before he was going to go do anything. Yeah.
The thing I'll disagree with you both on, that I don't know why, if I'm just really lucky, all the deer that I've killed off antlers, not one of them have even attempted to go downwind.
They just came straight to you.
Yep. And because that's what I was sitting here thinking of, because you guys keep saying that, and it makes total sense, especially like with your elk hunting and everything. But
well, I think it depends.
I hardly ever have deer try to literally, like, where you can see them try to circle.
I think it can depend on the situation though too, because like there's some times where we've been, and this is more so with elk, where the bull is going so nuts that when you call to him, he don't care about the wind. He's not thinking that straight. Like, this deer or this bull is freaking coming on a line. And then you throw one call at them, and here they come, a million miles an hour. The one I can think is when we busted those cows off of the canyon with him. That bull was going so nuts. Yeah. You could have probably drove a semi by, and he would have still come in.
I think that's more prominent for the elk, though. I'm talking like, I've had deer stroll in.
For sure.
Like where they're just chilling. I've had them come running, and
see, I've had the ones that I've always had that have come, and I think you can tell from their body language somewhat how fired up they are or not. I've had a couple that have come downwind, and they're usually the ones taking their time.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is I've had ones taking their time where they'll even stop and feed in between, and
still came right to you.
The buck I shot on the hill was like 200. Or the stand that me and you sat together. That's where I ended up shooting my deer.
But remember, Morphe came to the antlers, but he came like 20, 30 minutes later.
Yeah,
what was that date,
later.
though? December 2nd, right? So I think that deer was probably like, oh, I'll go see. He wasn't super fired up, you know. Like,
That's my
"Oh,
point.
let's
You're
go."
saying, yeah, but you're saying the ones that are fired or that aren't fired up, that are just kind of coming in slowly, working their way in, are typically the ones that are going downwind. And that's what I'm saying is I have had both, where they're sprinting in, which those ones I don't expect them to go try to get downwind because they are so fired up. Him, I would have expected. He came from 200 or 300 yards away and came straight across a field, just walking slowly.
Yeah, but so he was out in that field, right, which is west of you, and you probably had a perfect west wind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he would have had to work really hard to get downwind of you. In that situation,
Yeah,
I think that's why I'd be way more nervous about it in his situation where the wind is not, he doesn't have to go that hard to go get the wind.
Right, it's not 180.
Yeah, it's not where they
Yeah.
have to make this huge loop to get around you.
I'd still risk it.
Well, I mean, and to your point, 2 times I can think of. One is when you shot touch, which, by the way, we should talk about because that was my sequence of rattling because I do rattle longer than a lot of people. And matter of fact, we were just watching Brendan, and I was coaching him as he was doing it, and he rattled for like 2, 3, 4 minutes.
His is the exact same, though.
Yeah.
So it was just
Yeah.
over and over.
But he killed his first deer with a bow, and it was, or second deer with a bow, but his first buck, and it was a 150-inch deer.
Yeah, it was a stud.
But the one I'm thinking of is Touch. Touch didn't check the wind. He came barreling in.
That was the same thing, though. It was a southwest wind. It would have been, he'd had to work really hard to get to the wind.
And the other thing is,
it wasn't
we knew
southwest wind. We went 100.
Straight south or southeast.
Southeast, yeah. Either one, though, he was going to have to work hard.
But we knew that deer, and we knew that deer was aggressive. That was why I told you to hunt. I was like, this deer was running everybody off, and even though he wasn't the biggest antler deer, he was very aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other one me and you killed that I shot just over the hill from there, he was 200-300 yards away when I hit the antlers, and he whipped around, and you filmed him run all the way in until I shot him at 12 yards.
Yep.
So sometimes I'm not saying that, but I agree with Warren that there are other times when a deer doesn't have that same demeanor, and that seems to be when they think more about what they're doing, and they're like, oh, I want to see what this is, and I'm going to take my time and work my way in there. The one that I would tell you that was exact opposite was Straight Up. Straight Up was not a fighter. I believe that deer, last year I said, I'm never rattling at him again because he would turn and go the other way. And then the one time I did get him to respond to it, he made this big loop and got around me. And the whole time, stop, look, stand there for 2-3 minutes, look. Then he'd come a little farther, stop, look. And you could tell what he was doing. He was trying to figure out what was going on without getting involved.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't want to commit. And so I think if you can know the deer, it helps. If you don't know the deer, you don't have a clue.
Yep.
But that's where blind rattling. But the one thing two things we have not covered, and I know we don't use a lot of it. I use it some. I will say I have not had much response from a bleat call, a doe grunt. And there's a lot of people out there. I know, like, most people don't even refer to it as a bleat anymore. They say the can. Do you have a can call? Well, the can is imitating a doe bleat is what it's doing.
I honestly can't speak to it because I've never even tried it. So I can't.
I have.
I
tried it in
can't
that
state
south
if it
stand.
does or work or not.
Well, I've used them multiple times, and I've never had an instance where
I've heard does do it though.
Yeah, I've many times, but I still have yet to this day had the instance where I've flipped that can over or used a bleat call that was on my grunt call and had a buck turn and come like I have with the grunt call, where I can say I know for a fact that my grunt call made that deer come here.
Yeah.
Or rattling antlers made him come here.
I'm the same way. I've tried it a couple times, and I just don't carry it because I've never had a response.
I still have one in
but
my
I
pack.
talk to people that
Love them.
yeah, swear by them. Like, they're like, I will never go without it. I'm like, well, I don't know what you put in your call, but it ain't working for me. So let me know what to do.
But then the other one that I said we would touch on, and we definitely should, because it is effective. It's also very
I know what you're about to
sensitive,
say, and we
and
should
that-
also, I think you can mention it, but I think we should do a separate one with Shane.
Is decoys?
Yep.
Okay, so
Because
we can
Shane's
wait.
got way
Yeah.
more experience.
Yeah, and I can save it for
Me and you've used some, though, together.
And I've had some really good experience. Man, the deer that I just mentioned from Illinois. And what's funny is when I killed that deer, I'll tell that one and then we'll leave it at that. But I killed that deer off of the backyard buck, and that's dating me because you guys probably don't even know what it is. But Walmart came out with a target that was one solid mold. It was like this wide, ears are like this, and then you would stick these antlers on it so you could shoot this thing. So it didn't look much like a whitetail deer. And we were visiting. I was hunting with a friend, Doug, and we had a family get together the night before we were going hunting, and the barber told me that he had a decoy, because I was mentioning I'd like to have a decoy where the spot I was going to hunt was between two small openings and a little road between them. And so I thought if I had a decoy sitting there, I would catch deer that came through either opening, and they'd see the decoy and I'd get a shot. He says, "Oh, you got to come over. I got a decoy you can borrow." And I was like, "Awesome." And so he tells me I got to go get it. Well, the next day we go over there to grab it before we go out to go hunting. And it's not a decoy. It's the backyard buck that he's been shooting. And then he did what everyone else does. He had shot a bunch of holes in it, so he got great stuff foam, sprayed it in there, and now it has big goiters sticking off the side of it. It's a big white thing. And I was like, "Man, Doug, I don't know." And Doug's like, "Are you really going to take it?" I'm like, "Well, we told him we would." I mean, he was like super jacked that I needed to take his decoy. He said, "We'll just put it in the truck and you don't have to use it." And he dropped me off that morning, and I get out of the truck and it's raining and it's supposed to turn to snow that day. It's really nasty weather. And I'm like, I'm going to stick it out there because it's so nasty where it can't hurt me, I don't think. I mean, worst case scenario, I got a fawn with an antler. And so I stuck it out there in this little opening, and I sat there all day and never saw a single deer until like 4:30 in the afternoon. I sat all day, and then this deer, right after the rain stopped, this deer showed up on the hill 300 yards away, and I hit the antlers. And when he entered that food plot, he still did, or it wasn't even a food plot. It was just a little field. I don't know what they had there, like just regular grass. But he was going across, and he had not seen the decoy. And so I grunted at him as he was walking by at like 65 yards, just walking through the field. But I was confident that it's the same buck I had seen up on the hill, and I hit the grunt call. And he turned and looked and saw that decoy and marched straight over to it. And I'm sure, considering that deer, Warren has killed the largest deer that any of us have ever killed that we know the weight. It was 264 pounds dressed. This deer is the only one that I would say that I think might have been heavier, because the meat locker after I killed him weighed him, and it was 215 pounds with no hide, no head, and no feet.
Holy cow.
And so I don't know but they called us to ask if we had weighed the deer. They were wanting to know and we said no. It just took 3 of us to get him on the minivan that we had rented. It was huge.
Good Lord.
And so anyhow, long story short though, this deer comes in, and the one little trick that I would tell someone that looking for using a decoy is I took one antler off. That's the little trick that will make them come to the weak side. And that deer swung right around to get around, which I'm sure at 300 pounds walking up on a
fawn with an antler.
45-pound one-antlered forked horn, he was thinking, I'm going to kill you. And
but that's, I think, the key to that right there, is what you just said, is that was the only deer you saw.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I really, really shy away from decoys, is I don't have a spot that I could sit where I feel as though I wouldn't have a doe that comes out and sits there and freaks out forever.
Yep. No, you got to be real picky with where you pick. Well, I think we've covered the calling pretty well. I mean, like we said, guys and gals both, if you guys don't have calls, if you don't have a grunt call, snort wheeze, and a set of antlers, you need to get them in your pack. And I'm going to tell you, carry them all season long. And just in case, what do you have to lose if that deer's walking away, hasn't winded you, and he's not coming toward you? See if it'll work. And then as you get more confident with it, you'll start to use them more often, to try to bring one in. So that's where we would tell you that you definitely, and I'm not going to tell you not to use or not to have a bleat call. Maybe we probably should have talked a little about, I would think all of us probably are in agreement, and that is like a setting on a grunt call. Where do you guys keep them?
I normally keep it the deepest I can.
And I do too. I've had that the lower grunts don't seem to change anything. I want the deepest that I can, but
I did change it to a younger buck the other day because I was grunting at one, and I had it
younger.
Yeah, and he was picked his head up but didn't really seem too interested, so I shrunk it down and did it, and then he turned even harder. He still didn't come in, but he definitely acted like he was more interested in that one than he was the first.
You're keeping it on the deepest. That's what I think most of us are doing, and maybe that's because the Midwest deer, our deer have deep grunts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do.
So, all right. Well, we've covered it until we hopefully have helped you go be ready to go out and call you in a deer. So thanks, guys. Again, we want you guys to make sure that you turn in reviews, review and let us know that we're doing what you want. And then the other one is
Thank you for all of you that have.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. It's helped a ton.
And then on top of that, give us your topics, because the last 2 topics that we have done have all come from people who wrote in or contacted us. You can shoot us an email. You can use Instagram, social media, whatever. But we sure appreciate all you guys. And it's October 24th. It's 3 o'clock. It's pouring down rain. And we're hoping that the rain's going to quit. And we're going to go climb in a tree and maybe grunt one in or rattle one in.
Bye.
Good luck to you guys.
Bye, guys.